John Smyth, Unholy Predator Video Analysis. Hello, I'm HG Tudor. John Smyth was a prolific unholy predator, an individual who preyed upon boys and young men, who meted out horrendous and sustained physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, and psychological abuse. It might also be said, if it was deemed to be a separate category, that he utilized spiritual abuse as a weapon, given that he utilized Christianity as a means to assert control and draw fuel from his victims, furthermore, to operate as a facade. This was an individual who abused young boys and men and members of his own family, an individual completely devoid of emotional empathy, who regarded what he was doing as righteous and correct, that knew that he was abusing, but saw it as appropriate. He regarded it as a means of healing individuals. He regarded his conduct as a means of teaching them that it was the application of his own perverted and twisted moral code. This conduct went on for years. Smyth never faced justice. Concerns were recorded in the Ruston Report of 1982, but this in effect was covered up and swept under the carpet, and it has not been until the recent Macon Report has delivered the findings showing the systematic abuse over decades by John Smyth, and the fact that the Church of England was aware of his behaviours and did nothing to stop him. Indeed, such is the extent of this man's behaviours that Justin Welby, the former Archbishop of Canterbury, has been found to be aware of what John Smyth was doing, that he failed to safeguard and protect children, he failed to take action to have Smyth held to account, and this precipitated his recent resignation. An individual that was meant to be a Christian, demonstrating the hypocrisy and of those that utilise the church as a weapon to carry out their own abuses against others. In particular with Smyth, he was a sadist. He derived pleasure from the way that he treated these boys. I have given you incidences of his behaviour from the Macon Report, but it's a 253-page report, and going through each and every aspect of it would be particularly time-consuming for the purposes of a video, and in some instances repetitive. You've been given very much a clear picture of the type of person that he was, the way that he behaved, and the way that he affected those around him. His narcissism is plain to see. But what we had not seen is Mr. Smyth in the open, so to speak. We hear from the victims of his historic behaviours. We have heard from the victims about the way that he has behaved and treated people. We have heard about the type of man that he was. But we haven't seen him in action, so to speak. But as a consequence of investigations by the Times and Channel 4 News, there was an instance where a reporter from Channel 4 confronted John Smyth and his wife Anne. And whilst it's only a short recording, it bears examination to tell us yet more about the type of individual John Smyth was. I'm now going to play the footage for you and provide you with an analysis. Here it is.
Mr. Smyth, Kathy Newman from Channel 4 News. We're told that you beat young men until they bled. Why did you do that?
I'm not talking about that.
Well, did you do it?
I'm not talking about that at all.
Well, one victim told us that you drove him to attempt suicide. Do you have any regrets for that?
I'm not talking about this. I'm sorry, it's...
Don't the victims deserve to hear why you did it?
How did you know I was here?
Don't the victims deserve to know why you did it?
I'm not talking about what we did at all. Please leave us alone.
Well, we've spoken to these victims who say that you beat them so hard that they bled.
I don't know anything about that.
What about Mark Stibbe? What about Richard Gittings? All these people, they've spoken to us. They respected you. They looked up to you. Do you think what you did was Christian?
I'm not answering any questions.
Why did these young men have to bleed for Jesus?
There's no question of that at all.
Mr. Smyth, when will you face justice?
Smyth died at the age of 77 back in 2018. He died of heart failure at his home in South Africa. Here, this confrontation clearly took place when he was in his 70s. The reporter first confronts him by explaining, "We are told you beat young men until they bled. Why did you do that?" You'll be aware that this is challenge fuel. The reporter is responding to him, thus giving him fuel, but she is seeking to hold him to account for behaviour which is viewed as bad. Therefore, she is challenging him. The response of Smyth is very interesting. He answers her, and he states, "I'm not talking about that." Note, there is no denial issued by Smyth, but instead, he knows and is allowed to know full well what he has done. But such is his arrogance and haughtiness, his line of defence isn't to issue a denial, but simply state, "I'm not discussing it with you." You can tell from his demeanour and his response that essentially he's thinking, "Who the hell do you think you are to ask me about that? I'm not talking about that with you." There is no denial of the events, but rather, "I'm not talking to you about that." He's dismissive and arrogant, and of course, his narcissism causes him to nullify the threat to control by simply dismissing the individual. You'll notice also that in the background, his wife is smiling when she hears the reporter state, "We are told that you beat young men until they bled. Why did you do that?" She isn't alarmed by the appearance of the journalist. She's not alarmed by what the reporter has to say, because she knew what her husband was doing, and she was complicit. She allowed it to take place and didn't report him and did nothing to protect her own children. The reporter presses, "Did you do it?" One victim told us, "You drove him to commit suicide. Do you have any response to that?" Naturally, the reporter is trying to trigger some guilty reaction on the part of Smyth, which of course is entirely futile when dealing with an individual such as him. Again, he states quite calmly, "I'm not talking about this." He refuses to be drawn, and instead he nullifies the threat to control because the journalist won't back down by starting to walk away. The third assertion of control, withdrawal. The journalist walks alongside him, persisting by stating, "Don't the victims deserve to hear why you did it?" Note that he doesn't round on the journalist, that he doesn't accuse or threaten. He simply remains calm and walks away. He then responds, "How did you know I was here?" Notice, he's not concerned in the slightest about being accused of being a child beater, of somebody that drove an individual to the brink of suicide. He's actually more concerned about why they know where he is. That is what is deemed to be a threat to control. The journalist continues to press him. He then states, "I'm not talking about what we did. Please leave us alone." Once again, he doesn't deny. He doesn't seek to justify what was done because he deems that he has no need to explain himself. Some might turn and start to explain why they did, seeking to justify their actions. He regards himself as above such need, that he is beyond the necessity of accountability, and instead simply asserts that he's not going to talk about what we did. It's then stated that he beat people until they bled, and names are mentioned. I beg your pardon, he alleges that he beat them until they bled, and it's at this point there is a denial where he says, "I don't know anything about that." The journalist lists the names of his accusers. He maintains silent, offering a present silent treatment as a means to nullify the threat to control. He keeps on walking as he seeks to withdraw. The journalist asks about whether this is Christian behaviour, and his response is to state, "I'm not answering any questions." Again, rather than deny what took place, rather than seek to justify his behaviour, he's haughty and high-handed. "I'm not here to answer you. I'm not here to be accountable to you. Who do you think you are asking that of me?" You'll also note the complete silence of his wife. She doesn't intervene on his behalf. She knows better than to do so. She isn't surprised by what's being said. It's not news to her. And he takes her hand, asserting control over his wife by physical means, walking her along. The journalist then asks, why did the boys have to bleed for Jesus? He responds, it's not a question of that at all. He's dismissive. He regards the journalist as a fly, a pest buzzing around him that is there to be ignored. He keeps his temper. He doesn't round with ignited fury. He doesn't lash out. He doesn't stop and debate. He simply decides, I'm not going to talk about what I have done. I am not accountable to anybody, let alone you, Madam Reporter, and seeks to nullify the threat to control by walking away. It's most interesting to watch this short exchange to see the level of control that is asserted by him over the ignited fury and the way that he deals with the repeated and persistent questioning of the journalist. It's also most indicative of the behaviours of his wife. It shows just how she is controlled by him and clearly has gone along with what he has done willingly. In the next part, I'm going to pull together the strands of John Smyth's behaviour. It's clear that he's a narcissist, but I will, of course, visit why that is, and to talk more about what his behaviour shows us, why he behaved as he did, what motivated him to do what he did, how he regarded his victims, and, most insightfully of all, I'll be telling you what type of narcissist he is, what his school is, and what his cadre is. Join me for that.